Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julie Massiello. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at RoamRight. I'd like to welcome everyone to RoamRight's webinar series with the FTA. Last month we did a presentation on travel insurance for international trips, and you can find that at roamright.com/partners/FTA. We do have one more webinar scheduled for January, and also please be sure to visit our booth at the FTA conference in Atlanta in February. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, simply type your question into the chat box and you can send it over. We'll be able to get to as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation, but if we don't get to your question today, we'll email you an answer directly within the next week. We will also be tweeting during the webinar. So if you're on Twitter, go ahead and follow us along at #RoamRightFTA. You can also submit questions that way. You'll see this hashtag at the bottom of our presentation on each slide, so if you don't jump on Twitter right away and you want to in the middle of the presentation, you won't forget the hashtag. We'll also have a few interactive polls during the webinar. So make sure you're paying attention because we have some really interesting statistics that we think that will be helpful for you. Our presenter today is Scott Walton. Scott is the Regional Sales Manager for RoamRight. Scott has more than a decade of experience in the travel insurance and assistance industry, including helping clients through medical, security, and travel emergencies. He's worked with a variety of organizations from Fortune 500 corporations and colleges and universities down to individual travel agencies. And before we get started, Scott's going to tell you a little bit about RoamRight.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate that introduction. As Julie mentioned, I'd like to just take a few minutes to tell you who Arch is and who RoamRight is. Arch is a worldwide insurance company with over 20 years of industry experience. It is also the parent company of RoamRight Travel Insurance. Arch is an active member of the U.S. Travel Insurance Association. In fact, our Senior Vice President of Travel serves on their board. Arch is unique in the industry in the fact that we hold both a A+ rating with the AM Best and the Better Business Bureau, and that's very important in this day and age that when you partner with a company like RoamRight to make sure that they're financially strong. For over a decade, Arch had underwritten and administered a variety of travel programs. If you ever looked at the DOC or the policy information, you probably saw our name out there. But several years ago, Arch decided that it wanted to enter the market directly and introduced RoamRight. They wanted to take their experience as well as their vertically integrated solution, meaning that our customer service, underwriting, and claims are all fully integrated and provided in-house. We feel that that model really allows us to be responsive to our client and customer needs. It's also very important to note that there's a lot of regulatory changes going on right now in the industry, and it's important to make sure that your partner is licensed. RoamRight is licensed in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. So, who are our clients? As you can see, we work with, pretty much everyone. We cover both domestic trips, obviously, because that's what we're talking about here today, but we also cover international trips. So if your clients travel both domestically and internationally, RoamRight can support them. We have plans that provide both pre-travel benefits such as trip cancellation and interruption, and also post-travel benefits like medical, security, and natural disaster evacuation coverage. To support our partners, we've also developed a number of tools to help them. One of our most popular is our co-branded partner portal, and if you're interested in learning more about that, you can certainly contact me and I'll be happy to discuss that with you. We also have come up with several plans that are unique to our partners. These plans cannot be found on our general website, and we do that so if your clients like the plan, they have to come back to you in order to purchase that policy. So we want to make sure that we're looking out for you as well as one of our partners.
All right, so it's quiz time already. We're going to start with a pretty simple question, and that is, do you regularly recommend travel insurance for your domestic travelers? Now, I think that this is pretty interesting from a question standpoint, not just because it's simple, but Scott, I think you've probably heard this out in the industry as well, that most people tend to think of travel insurance as more necessary for international trips rather than domestic, I think mostly because of the health insurance benefits.
Absolutely. And by the end of this webinar, we will make sure that everyone changes their mind and is offering it for both domestic and international travel.
All right. So as it turns out, that people are regularly recommending it.
That's great.
That is great, because if you look at the percentage of our policies that are sold for travelers going to the U.S., it's what, about 20%?
Yep, about 20% of all policies.
So that's a big chunk of our business is for domestic travel.
So it looks like I think we're going to do another quiz
Yeah,
right out of the
sure,
gate.
why not, now that we're warmed up.
Okay.
All right, so according to the U.S. Travel Insurance Association survey, which generation is most likely to purchase travel insurance? Now this is interesting too. I'm wondering what people are going to decide here, because on the one hand you could look at mature folks and think, again, it's all about the medical benefits.
Yep, indeed.
So let's see. All right, so most of our listeners today think that the baby boomers are the generation most likely to purchase travel insurance. What's the answer?
Millennials.
Is that interesting?
It is. Yep. And just for those maybe who aren't familiar with what the age brackets are, millennials are individuals that are 15 to 34. So it's interesting that the youngest of the population is the one that's most likely to buy the travel insurance.
I think so too. And what that really speaks to is that, again, where most people think of travel insurance as more of a medical necessity, the trip cancellation benefits and not losing your deposits and prepaid expenses is really important, especially to this millennial group.
Yep, indeed. So, as Julie mentioned, most people think that travel insurance is more geared towards international trips. So, why would somebody want to buy insurance for domestic travel? Travel difficulties. Julie just mentioned some. You may have to cancel a trip. Some other popular ones are, a delayed trip, canceled flights, lost luggage. And in some cases, these can be minor inconveniences, but others, they can, be quite significant or really put a wrinkle in your travel plans. What if a traveler misses a day of a group tour because of a flight delay? They could be out those costs. Or what if their luggage goes to Portland, Maine instead of Portland, Oregon? And these things happen quite often. And again, you land somewhere and you're expecting to get your bag, and next thing you know, it's not there. Health, illness, and injury. Just because you're away from home, doesn't mean that you're immune to everyday occurrences that happen. Even with excellent primary health insurance, there's still a lot of out-of-network costs, high co-pays, deductibles that travel insurance can help with, and we're going to look at that a little more later on. And with recent changes in healthcare, there's some plans that have significantly reduced the benefits that they offer if an individual happens to travel out of their home state. And then lastly are natural disaster and security events. We have a great infrastructure in this country to help when those scenarios happen, but your travelers can certainly face some pretty extreme circumstances if they happen to be caught in one of them. And again, we're going to look at some real live examples a little bit later on in the presentation. So one of the things that you can really help your travelers is understand and educate them on the importance of travel insurance. As Julie mentioned, one of the biggest things is, can a traveler afford to lose their travel investment? Nobody expects to cancel a trip, but whether it's through fundraising or you're just saving up and you've booked this great $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 trip, and something happens, can you really afford to lose that investment? I would figure that probably 100% of the people that you polled would say that they could not. So that's something very important, way that travel insurance can help, is to protect that financial investment. Does your traveler have insurance that will travel with them? Again, we talked about that there are a lot of out-of-pocket costs, co-pays and deductibles. With plans that include the medical coverage, travel insurance can really help with those out-of-pocket expenses. And then, can you get your travelers home quickly? If they happen to be caught in a natural disaster or security event, are you in a position to help them get out of that situation? Let's say it's 2 o'clock in the morning and something happens in their destination and they need to get out immediately. Are you going to be prepared to help them in that situation?
And I think if you think about natural disasters, a lot of times we hear in the news that people think of, earthquake in Nepal or some, things happening overseas. But just recently, Hurricane Patricia could have been a real natural disaster for people traveling here within the United States.
Absolutely. And that brings me, we talked about being prepared and, can you help your travelers? I was at a show recently and I ran into a travel agent and asked them, what happens if one of your travelers experiences a situation, in the middle of the night? And their response was, he has them call him. Well, I appreciate the fact that he wants to help his clients, but he's really not going to be in a position to help them if they have a medical emergency or some kind of security event. With travel insurance, your travelers have access to 24/7 emergency assistance services, and it's much better that they would call those experts than relying on, their travel agent or tour operator at 2 o'clock in the morning or any time for that matter.
Because I think what people don't really understand sometimes about an emergency toll-free number is that you're not just talking to somebody on the other end of the phone. Our assistance provider has people on the ground all over the world who can help travelers when there's a situation. Sometimes you can't just help somebody from over the phone. You need somebody there on the ground.
Absolutely. And, we've seen a lot of scenarios where somebody will be traveling and, they'll go to a hospital because it's recommended by somebody local, and it turns out it's probably not the best hospital. There could be one much better a block down the road. So, again, the assistant providers, know the area. They handle cases throughout the year, 24/7, 24 hours a day, and they have the expertise to help. So, when a traveler needs help, understand the types of travel problems that they may encounter. We looked at a few earlier, the lost luggage, those type of things, and we're going to, again, look at some more live case examples here a little bit later on. Know the types of travel insurance coverage that are available to meet your client's specific needs. For example, is there a high probability that they may need to cancel their trip? Are there valuable items that they may be traveling with that if they lost or they were stolen, they would have to pay for those costs, or it could ruin their trip? What if they're photographers and their camera's stolen?
Or even more simple than that, if my iPhone drops in a toilet and I don't have, which has happened before, you feel lost because that's your only way to connect with people back home. And these days, travelers are very connected when they're on the road.
Yep. What if their flight is delayed and they miss prepaid nights at their hotel or resort, or maybe they're going on a golf trip and they're supposed to tee off the next day and their flight's delayed and they don't make it. They could be out that expense of the greens fees and, the hotel that they're staying in, et cetera. And one of the most common reasons that claims are denied is because, people don't fully understand their coverage. If you have a specific question, make sure that you call the customer service department, because they can really go through all the different type of benefits that are included in the policy, and they're also happy to discuss any scenarios that if somebody wants to lay a scenario out there that they can help with. And then know what tools are available. I strongly recommend that people download our free mobile app. It provides a wealth of information. Domestically, it's very important because it can provide travel alerts that individuals may not know are going on in their destination where they're about to travel. Some recent examples that on our mobile app, there were winter storm warnings. It's hard to believe that we're already getting winter storm warnings.
I don't want to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, if you were traveling to Nevada or the Northern Rockies or Washington State, they were expecting severe winter storms. Something that we don't expect to hear in the United States, but there was a West Nile virus outbreak in California. So if you're traveling to California, you may want to look into that to see if there's any precautions that you want to take. Another interesting one, dengue fever in Hawaii, and major flooding in Texas, Illinois, and measles exposure in Virginia. So, these alerts aren't to scare you or to scare your travelers. It's just to help them understand that they may need to prepare and look at some, alternatives or some steps that they can take to protect themselves. Also with the mobile app, you can contact our customer service department directly, and you can also contact our 24/7 emergency response center if they need any help. So now let's look at some real life situations. You're flying through Boston when the marathon bombing occurred. You have a winter storm that cancels your church retreat. You break an arm while on tour. A family member passes away mid-tour and you have to come home. A sick traveler needs to cancel their trip, or as Julie mentioned, she'd be lost without her phone. And we're also going to look at a case where somebody lost their iPad on a flight. So first, let's look at the terrorist attack. Very fortunately in this country, we don't get a lot of terrorist attacks. They do happen. Just looking at the Boston Marathon bombing from 2013 as an example, even if your travelers weren't involved in the marathon, they could have certainly been directly impacted by the blast. What if they were visiting Boston at the time of the bombing and wanted to get home immediately? With the entire city on high alert, Logan Airport put a ground stop that morning, so flights weren't leaving. How would you help those travelers? Another scenario that happened then is, a flight had delays because the crew requested that the travelers and their bags be rescreened before departure. So here you're getting ready to leave, all the bags have been screened, and after the blast they had to unload the bags and have them rescreened. That can certainly take a lot of time. And what if your travelers were planning a trip to Boston and wanted to cancel the trip because of the event? So the common theme with all this is that these are the type of things that travel insurance can help with. So we could help that person who wanted, who maybe was delayed. We can help them rebook their flights, or if their flights were canceled, and the travel insurance may even have paid any change fees that they encountered. A flight delay can also cause problems for the rest of the trip. What if the ground stop caused the traveler to miss a connection and they ended up having to spend the night somewhere? Those costs can add up very quickly, from lodging, meals, and transportation. One example we have is, we had a couple that got stuck in New York overnight because of a delay, and they ended up having a $330 claim. Again, you're saving up for your trip, your travelers are saving up for their trip, and next thing you know, they're hit with a $330 bill. Again, that's something that travel insurance can help with. But what if your travelers lost a full day of their destination because of a delay? Again, those expenses can add up quickly, and again, that's something that travel insurance can help with. Or we mentioned, what if your travelers were planning a trip to Boston and wanted to cancel their trip? Because Boston was deemed a terrorist attack, our travel insurance policy would cover those non-refundable trip costs that they chose to cancel. Nobody expects or anticipates that there's going to be a security event where they're traveling, especially domestically. But as we just saw, it can happen. So it's very important to protect that investment with travel insurance.
And you know, Scott, I think these days we're so used to being able to return things and get our money back. I can buy shoes online, and if I don't like them, I can return them and get my money back, no shipping costs or anything. What people, I think, who don't travel a lot might not realize is that so many expenses are non-refundable in today's travel world, and or there are extreme change fees that are associated with making those changes. So this point that you make about the non-refundable piece, even if you're not going on a big tour, a lot of times you will have expenses that you are impacted by if something like this happens.
Yep, absolutely. You know, another disruption that occurs much more frequently is related to weather and natural disasters. You know, hurricanes, tornadoes, winter storms, earthquakes, flooding, you know, all impact travelers throughout the U.S., you know, pretty much on a regular basis. You mentioned, you know, the hurricane, and, you know, recently we had Hurricane Joaquin that created severe flooding in South Carolina. Roads were closed, bridges washed away, clean water wasn't available. I know, you know, University of South Carolina was shut down for several weeks because they didn't have the infrastructure. So, you know, how can travel insurance help there? You know, let's say your travelers were there and had to get out. You know, do you have that infrastructure in place? That's something we can help with. Or what if your travelers were getting ready to travel to South Carolina on a trip? You know, can they cancel their trip? Would it be covered? You know, when is it too late to buy the travel insurance? In a case like Hurricane Joaquin, people who had planned and bought their policies early on were able to cancel their trip if their accommodations were rendered uninhabitable, they experienced extended road closures preventing them from traveling, or let's say they wanted to fly to South Carolina, you know, if the air services were interrupted. You know, if a trip wasn't canceled but simply delayed for a covered reason, you know, we would cover meals, accommodations, local transportation, and any of the missed prepaid expenses that they may have incurred. On the other side of the calendar, winter storms. We just, a couple of those examples, look at 3 winter storms that are going on, and it's only early November. You know, so you don't always have warning with snow. You know, this past winter, for a real-life example, we had a church group that planned a weekend retreat in Tennessee when a blizzard dumped 15 inches of snow in the house they rented.
And who would have thought in Tennessee?
I know, 15 inches. Roads were closed, and local officials ordered everyone to stay off the roads. Fortunately, this group had purchased travel insurance, and the expenses they paid for the property that they purchased were non-refundable, and RoamRight covered their cancellation. They had paid roughly $2,500 for that trip. Their policy only cost $140, and we paid them back for that $2,500. So,
yep, that's great.
Would you rather pay $140 or be out $2,500?
I'll tell you, if anybody were to give you that option if you were investing in the stock market, you would pay $140 anytime.
Sign me up.
That's right.
In another, you know, in addition to covering cancellations, you know, we can also cover delays or interruptions. For example, you know, if you're stuck in an airport for 6 hours or more because of a delay, you're probably going to have incidental charges like food that travel insurance will pay for as well.
Right.
So since we're on the topic of weather, let's take another quiz.
All right.
Julie, please.
Okay. So which airport has the most delays due to weather? Is it San Francisco, Denver, Chicago O'Hare, or LaGuardia? And I have to tell you, this one's a tough one because when I think about where the most traffic goes through, I know I used to live in Atlanta, and it always bounced back and forth between Atlanta or Chicago having the most traffic, or LaGuardia as part of the 3 airports in New York as having the most traffic. And you have to think that everybody Denver, Chicago, LaGuardia, they all have bad weather during the winter time.
Did you just give a hint on what the answer is?
No.
We talked about 3 of them. So
maybe I did. So it looks as though our listeners think that Chicago has the most delays due to weather. But what's interesting is that the most delays due to weather are in San Francisco, which you wouldn't think, because you don't think of winter weather or extreme storms being there, but the fog is a big deal.
Yep. And the runways, the way they're laid out,
That's
because they're parallel, if you have a delay, you can't land and take off. So
right.
You wouldn't think it, but it makes perfect sense.
Yep. All right.
So, let's talk about another reason why people don't think they need travel insurance when staying in the United States, and that is health insurance. As we mentioned before, even with great health insurance plans, there's a lot of out-of-pocket costs that can add up. Co-pays, deductibles, out-of-network costs, are just a few. How high is your traveler's medical deductible? I mean, is it $500, $1,000, $1,500? I've seen them $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
If they have to pay that deductible, are they going to be in a position to pay that out of pocket at that time?
And if you think about it, if you're away from your home base, even in the U.S., and you need medical care, it's not going to be the typical office visit at a doctor kind of medical care. You might have to go to the emergency room or something that's a lot more expensive than the care that you would be able to get if you were in a familiar area.
Yep, indeed. And on top of those costs, that we just mentioned, what if you needed to get one of your travelers home, or if somebody in your group was hospitalized and a traveling family member needed to stay with them, or they were by themselves and somebody needed to go to their bedside to help them. Those, again, are all situations that travel insurance could help with. This slide is very interesting. In the United States, we think that, everyone can easily get to adequate care.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just because you're in the United States, that doesn't, necessarily ring true. Nearly 45 million Americans don't have access to a level 1 or 2 trauma center within 1 hour of being injured. Take a look at this map. In the purple area is where you are able to get to a high level of care pretty quickly, but there's a lot of white on that map.
Yes,
and for those areas, you're not going to be able to get to a high level trauma center quickly. And when you're sick or injured and you need to get someplace quickly. So your primary health care may provide coverage for a medical evacuation, or it may not.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't, that's something that travel insurance can help with.
And if you think about where, for instance, some of the FTA audience might be going to for mission trips in the U.S., some Habitat for Humanity types of projects, that tends to be in a lot of rural areas where you see some of that white on this map.
Right. And so, we mentioned earlier that that's also where the assistance provider can come in to help them, because they're going to know what resources are available.
That's
so,
right.
We talk a lot about the benefits from, protecting them, paying for evacuations, but also having that resource available to help them coordinate the evacuation is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Again, when there's a medical emergency, there's often family implications as well. If a family is traveling with a patient, would they have to cut their trip short, to stay with them? If so, where are they going to stay? So we can help with finding the hotel. They're going to have hotel expenses, food expenses. They could lose trip deposits that they were planning on, taking advantage of. There could be change fees in the airline. With travel insurance, all these items are minimized as well.
Yep, that's right.
Let's look at another real-life example. We had a couple who were on a bus tour through California. The wife broke her arm and required surgery. The team of physicians used by our assistance provider concurred with the doctors in California and the patient's home doctor, and it was decided that she should return to the East Coast for further treatment. Because of the complexity of the situation, the patient needed a non-medical escort, meaning, she needed help getting through the airport, help with ticketing, help with getting on and off the plane, and, little things like what if she needed to use the restaurant room on the plane?
Right.
She's going to need help getting there. So fortunately, she was with her husband, and he was able to serve in this role. But if she had been by herself, the travel insurance would have got her a non-medical escort to help her with all those things. Because of the short notice of purchasing 2 plane tickets, was quite costly. If you miss a booking within 2 weeks, how expensive plane tickets become.
Absolutely.
In their case, it was $3,796 worth of plane tickets that we covered for that claim. And how much do you think they paid for a policy?
Well, I know the answer, but I think, again, it's a pretty good investment if you think about they only paid $27 for that policy.
That's, again, out almost $3,800 or paying $2,700 for a policy.
Absolutely. And when I keep going back to especially the Faith Travel Association memberships and the fundraising that often happens for youth groups to go on trips and things like that, you're going to have somebody who maybe a teenager is going in a youth group. The group is going to keep going, and who's going to help that teenager get back home if there's some sort of a medical situation?
Yep, absolutely. So, why would a trip be canceled or interrupted? Here's a variety of reasons listed on the screen. It's very important that, when you buy a policy, to make sure that you read the insurance plan. Again, if you have any questions about what is covered and what isn't covered, to contact the customer service representative. A couple of things that, I think make RoamRight unique is our coverage for military assignment or revocation of leave. So, if a military personnel has this great trip plan, but they are called to duty or they're reassigned someplace, our policies will pay for that canceled trip.
Right.
Or maybe somebody's going to visit that military member, and because again they've been reassigned or deployed, we're going to pay for that trip as well.
Yeah, and if you think about it, if you were based in Florida and then you were transferred to Texas, but your tickets were to depart from Florida, that's more expensive.
Yep. In one more real-life case example, we had a couple traveling on a tour, and just one day into their trip, their sister at home unexpectedly passed away. We don't like to think of those things happening, but unfortunately they do. And this couple obviously needed to return home immediately. Again, because of last-minute airfare, it could be quite expensive. Their airfare to get home was $1,878. The policy that they paid was $54, and we covered that.
It's, what I'm starting to notice as a theme here is that it's really not that expensive for somebody to buy travel insurance.
No, it's not expensive to buy it, and if you're looking at all the claims, they're quite high.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
Again, I'll take that return on investment any day.
Yep.
In another real-life example, a woman was planning to be part of a group tour to Glacier National Park. Unfortunately, she had severe joint inflammation just days before she was scheduled to leave, and her doctor, said you can't go on the trip. There's too much walking around. There could be issues, if you're on the plane. So she was basically ordered to stay home. The cost of her tour was over $2,000, and her travel insurance policy was $83. Let's talk luggage. One of the most common travel mishaps is lost or stolen luggage. Just think how much it would cost you to replace those items in your suitcase, whether it's clothes, shoes, your phone, your computer accessories, any personal care items. Most travelers save up again and budget for their trip. They don't plan on losing all their possessions and having to buy that while on their trip. So, again, that's something that travel insurance can help with.
Especially a miserable experience if you're traveling from one type of weather to another. And, and you've you're wearing your winter coat and you've packed for Florida.
Yep, you don't want to have to wear your parka while you're down in Florida
right,
and it's 85 degrees. So let's take another quick poll. Julie?
All right. Okay, this is also another I think that all of these questions are interesting because I think it really hits home the need. How many bags were mishandled by U.S. Airlines in 2014? Was it 8 million, 16 million, 22 million, or 35 million? Just the fact that we're talking about millions is pretty upsetting as a traveler. It looks as though our results are coming in, and most of the folks have picked 35 million. Oh,
we still got them coming in there.
I was going to say, now it's starting to even out a little bit. This is interesting. I think it's the type of question that you're really not quite sure.
And you're not happy with any of the answers.
No, you're not happy at all. Looks like the real answer is 22 million. And by mishandled, a lot of times it's not just, I'm waiting at the carousel and it comes out late. This means you're not getting your bag, or your bag is going to come 5 days into your trip or a couple of days into your trip. And
I don't think you want to wear the same clothes for 5 days. So.
I don't think my traveling companions would want me to.
Not at all. And that it just fits in perfectly with the claims that we see. Last year, nearly a third of our claims were related to luggage.
That's right.
Some of the most common items reported missing were jewelry, clothing, travel accessories, personal electronics, and computers and accessories. Let's look at another real-life example. In one case, we had a traveler who had rearranged her bags at the airport and moved her iPad into her carry-on. When she went to get it out during mid-flight, it was missing. So, did she, I guess there is a possibility that she left it sitting wherever she was in the airport, or, did somebody watch her slip it into her bag and when she wasn't looking and take it? Either way, she was out of a device valued at about $277. Again, we, paid that, so that's something that we reimbursed. We had another case, this one's a little more upsetting, I guess. We had another case where a man's suitcase disappeared from a bus. In fact, witnesses saw that somebody had walked up and actually stole his bag. So, he was out everything that was in his suitcase. He must have very good taste because the claim was almost $1,000, and his policy was $48.
Yep.
So we've just reviewed a few of the benefits of travel insurance and how it can help your domestic travelers. Here are a few more ways. We also offer a couple upgrades called Cancel for Any Reason and Cancel for Work Reasons. Cancel for Any Reason, or better known as CFAR, covers things pretty much what it says. You can cancel for any reason. Things like, what if you're a diehard football fan and your team makes it to the Super Bowl after 69 years? If there's any Cleveland Brown fans out there.
Experience.
Yep. And you're offered free tickets on the 50-yard line. What are you going to do?
Free tickets anywhere.
Yep. Or what if you simply change your mind about going? Or, what if we saw this past summer, for anybody who was following the stories in North Carolina with all the shark attacks, you see all the shark attacks and you decide, what, I don't want to go on my trip anymore.
Not time for a beach vacation.
No.
And, this is also, I think, a very interesting benefit because so many people who decide that they don't want the travel insurance do so because they say, I don't know if I'm going to be able to cancel for a covered reason. What if my reason isn't covered? When we say cancel for any reason, we mean any single reason. You can wake up one day and say, I just don't feel like going. If it was a ski trip, for instance, and there was no snow, who wants to go?
Exactly. Or what if you miss a connection and your trip's delayed, and you're going to be out all those prepaid trip activities or nights in hotel. We saw the sister who had passed away, and, we don't like to think about someone passing away while traveling, but it happens. So it's important to have a repatriation, a remains benefit. Making arrangements, to transport remains home is complicated and can certainly be a costly process. We also offer rental car coverage, and it's a very popular upgrade. It protects against damages and fees associated with a car accident while driving a rental car.
I don't know how many times I've gone to the rental car counter and handed over my credit card thinking, I hope this is really covered, because I know through everything in the news they say you shouldn't take that costly upgrade at the rental car counter. I know your credit card has some benefits to it, but a lot of times those benefits are very limited.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point, because a lot of times people don't buy travel insurance because they think they do have coverage through things like the credit card, even for medical. And really, if you look at the benefits, while they may have some, it's not going to cover hospitalization or be nearly enough to cover an evacuation if somebody needs to be evacuated. Another important thing is to look at a hazardous sports upgrade. So, if your travelers plan on scuba diving or bungee jumping, their domestic health care policy may not pay that, so they may want to look at adding a hazardous sports upgrade as well. And I think, as you've seen throughout this presentation, the best part about travel insurance, it's affordable, whether you're traveling domestically or internationally. Our policies start as little as $11 a day, depending on the age of the traveler and their trip cost. I don't think anybody out there was tallying up all these claims that we paid, but, just these examples alone added up to $12,000.
Right.
And the policies that, the policy premium was $700. So, how do you talk to your travelers about travel insurance? I think sometime that, operators, tour operators or agents or, whoever's booking the trip are hesitant to do so. Make it a priority. We're starting to see more and more of our partners making travelers sign something saying that travel insurance was offered, because what will happen is somebody will go on a trip, something will happen, they'll be out of, all these expenses will be out of pocket that they have to pay for, and they'll say, well, why didn't you offer me travel insurance? So protect yourselves, offer it, and have them sign something saying that it was offered. Tell your travelers to print out their ID cards. They can certainly get it on the mobile app, but it's important to have it in their wallet as well, because on there is going to be the number for customer service and the 24/7 emergency response center.
All right.
Also have them print out their confirmation of benefits so they know exactly what is covered. And then make sure that they keep the receipts. If they do have to file a claim, maybe take pictures of them and upload those to the mobile app as well.
Which is very easy to do.
It makes the claims process much easier and quicker.
That's right. That's right. All right. So now we are at the fun part, which is the questions from our audience. I see that several of them have come in so far, and I think, Scott, what I'll do is I'll just read them off to you.
Okay.
And we not only have Scott in the room, but we also have Austin Bowers, who is part of our customer service group, who is very knowledgeable about the very minute details of the travel insurance policies and what they cover. So we brought her for backup.
Yeah, well, let's see how much she knows. Somebody asked a really tough question, and let's see what Austin does.
All right, let me see.
All right.
Let me see. Well, this isn't a tough question, but do you offer coverage for groups?
We do. We offer coverage for both individuals and groups. What's nice about the group plans is it's based on trip cost only, where the individual plans are based on trip cost and age. So it makes it very easy if you want to calculate for your group how much their coverage is going to be. And you can, publicize that and make it known up front.
Okay. This is a very interesting question. When is it too late? We talked about hurricanes, right? When is it too late to buy insurance for a hurricane or another storm?
Austin?
So this is a great example of why it's good to buy your travel insurance sooner rather than later. As in the case of the recent Hurricane Joaquin scenario, travelers who bought their insurance months in advance when they first made their deposits were covered for the storm, but by the time it had become a named hurricane and was already forecasted and we were pretty sure as to when and where the actual hurricane was going to hit, at that point it is too late to be covered for those hurricane-related inconveniences. So it's another sooner rather than later scenario.
Yep, and there's also some benefits of buying insurance when you make your initial trip deposit, because there's some added benefits that you're going to be able to get with that. There's also upgrades like cancel for any reason that would be available at that time.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, we had talked about the iPhone in the toilet, but your camera or something else could be stolen.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of documentation do you need if your camera is stolen?
Yeah, the most important thing is to file a police report, so you have it, because that's something that our claims department is going to want to see. So I would say that's probably the most important thing.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you do have original receipts for those kinds of especially high dollar items like electronics, cameras, tablets, that's certainly helpful. Not having a receipt, however, does not preclude you from filing a claim. So if you don't still have the original receipt for an iPad you bought 2 years ago, still please file the claim, because then we can certainly reimburse on a more prorated basis.
Okay. I see we got 2 questions that came in back to back that relate to the best way to convince your traveler that travel insurance is important, and how you make that weave into the conversation without seeming like, you know, you're pouncing on them. And
yeah, I think a great question to ask right up front is, you know, you've, again, saved up for this trip. You know, it's a great trip you're going on. It's $2,000. You know, if something happens, you know, do you want to forfeit that? You know,
Right.
Are you able to lose that amount? I mean, if somebody asked me that question, you know, it probably wouldn't dawn on me at that time or as I'm making my trip, but if somebody said, you do know if you cancel, you know, these may not be refundable,
Mm-hmm.
you know, are you willing to gamble losing that money?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great question to ask. And then, you know, we have certainly tons of real-life examples that, you know, you saw through the presentation that we're also happy to share. You know, ask them, you know, if you're hospitalized, you know, are you going to be able to afford the co-pays? Or, you know, have you looked at your health insurance? Does it cover the type of activities that you're going to be taking on this trip?
Right, right. And use some of the examples that we've provided in this webinar, because, again, if you look at the cost benefit associated with buying the travel insurance, I think a lot of times if you ask the question without giving them an actual price on what the travel insurance costs, you know, it sounds like an expensive proposition, but then if somebody says, and that'll be $27, and I just plunk down a couple $1,000s for a trip or more, to me that's a no-brainer.
Yep. Yeah, and that brings up a great point. I mean, our partners, as we mentioned, should always call our customer service department if they have questions like that. And, you know, we can certainly provide pricing guides for you to have on hand, so you can quickly say, you know, a traveler is this age, their trip cost is this. Again, it's going to be X amount for you.
Yes, exactly. Okay, somebody is asking about the mobile app, where they can get more information on the mobile app.
Yeah, you know, with the mobile app, I believe so strongly in it. I'd like to have people reach out. You know, they can certainly contact me. You know, we can provide a demonstration, or Austin can, of the mobile app. There's also some information on YouTube for the mobile app, and we'd be happy to set up a test demo account where they can go in and see all the benefits of it. You know, we talked about the mobile app primarily from a domestic standpoint. If you also have international travelers, there's some fantastic tools that are available in there. They can research destinations and get hospital lookups. They can evaluate any immunization requirements they may want to be aware of, exit and entry requirements to security events. And my favorite tool is it has a translation service. So if somebody's going to an area and they don't speak the language, let's say it's from English to Spanish, and they need a doctor, it'll say in English, I need a doctor, and below it's Spanish, and then they can even push a button and it will say I need a doctor in Spanish. So,
right. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yep.
It's really cool. Here's another one that just came in. My current partner makes my clients provide original receipts with their claims, and clients are hesitant to send them in. Do you require original receipts, or do you accept copies and pictures of receipts when you're filing a claim?
You do not have to send original receipts. In fact, we encourage you to keep a copy of your receipts for your records, especially if you are mailing in your documentation. We all know the United States Postal Service sometimes struggles with getting things where they're going in a timely fashion. So definitely keep your originals on hand and feel free to send in copies, or you can scan and email your documents, or of course you can fax them as well.
And again, that's the great thing about the mobile app, right? Because you can just take pictures of your receipts. I know that when my travel bag comes back, there's just a mess of stuff in there. If you just encourage your travelers to take the pictures of the receipts as they're going along, that's really all they need.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and a lot of times on receipts, there's other items besides just that one. So yeah, we would never expect somebody to have to surrender that original.
All right, another question here. Can I build travel insurance into the price of the tours that I offer?
Yeah, again, that's the nice thing about the group programs that we have. If you know the price of the tour, it's very easy to calculate what the premium is going to be for everyone. You can still use the individual plans for group tours, and you can contact, customer service. Austin does this all the time, where she'll calculate what the cost is for your group, and we'll send that back to you. So we can do it either way, if you use the individual plans or the group plans.
Okay, very good. Here's another good one. Is the cost of insurance based on traveler age? My tour groups are often elderly, and insurance can be expensive.
Yeah, again, the individual plans are going to be based on age and trip cost, but the group plans, and the group plans are great because not only is it based on trip cost only, but only 8 people of the group that are on the itinerary are required to get it. So if you have a group of 20 people traveling, not all 20 have to buy it as long as 8 do. Mm-hmm. And the group plans definitely tend to be priced very effectively for the older traveling population.
Okay. We might have one of our some folks on here that we've talked to before, because I see somebody's asking a question about annual plans. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, especially as it relates to our travel agent partners?
Oh, okay. Yeah, we do certainly have annual plans, and we do have a annual plan that we make available to our partners. It's a very cost-effective plan, and it includes all your medical and security. It also has a pre-X waiver automatically, which I don't think any other annual agent plans offer. Mm-hmm. And it also comes with $2,500 in trip cancellation benefits. If that's not enough for you, if you travel more than that throughout the year, you can purchase upgrades that up to $10,000. So, we really do provide a very comprehensive plan and some great upgrade benefits.
Okay. Piggybacking on one of the other questions that we had, when you're chatting with someone about their trip to Rome, which I love, by the way, and want to plug the insurance, it's not realistic to suddenly say, can you afford to lose your $5,000? I'd love to know what's a less threatening way a customer service rep could bring up, especially, like you said, so many people expect refunds or everything now, and it's a tough conversation to start. I'll jump in on that one because I'm a firm believer that travel insurance isn't a sell per se. I think it's part of the discussion as you're planning the trip. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very realistic to say to the customer, look, as we go through the travel planning process, I'm going to be very transparent with you about what is refundable, what's not refundable. Let's talk about your budget for the trip itself. And as you're talking about budget, I think you're right. You can't just jump in just suddenly and say, can you afford to lose your $5,000? But I think that travel insurance should just be part of the overall purchase discussion, no different than airport transfers and what that would cost and things like that. Again, because the support to that is, look, you really need to get it because you can't afford to lose your $5,000. But what it's really a discussion about is this is a total planning process, and I don't want you to plunk down this cash that if anything could happen, God forbid, your grandmother passes away. Grandma doesn't have to be traveling with you, but if grandma passes away before you're ready to leave, I would hate for you to lose this investment that you're making. So we actually have a blog post about this very topic on RoamRight.com/partners. Since we're coming to the close here of our hour, I think that that's a good segue to letting you know how you can reach us. If you go to RoamRight.com/partners, you'll see a blog post about that and other blog posts that are relevant to our travel partners and other travel suppliers as well. I would love for you to reach out to Scott or to our other colleague, Lisa Minton. Their contact information is here. And if you check us out at facebook.com/RoamRight or twitter.com/RoamRight, you'll find some more information as well. Thank you so much for taking an hour out of your very busy schedule. I know it's really hard when you're working with customers to take time out to do something like this. We really appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to talking with you.
Yep, and if you are going to the FTA conference, please make sure to come by and see us. We'd love to meet you in person.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.